Here.
Pies.
Present.
Martin.
Here.
Tisdale.
Here.
Shriver.
Here.
Thank you.
First item on our agenda is to approve the minutes from last committee meeting. Representative McFall motions to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Seeing no objection, the minutes are approved. So next up, we have a presentation from the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. We are joined today by Acting Director Dan Eichinger and Legislative Liaison Travis Boskul. So thank you both for taking the time to come before the committee. And I'll let you get settled in, and then you can take it from here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee members. My name is Dan Eichinger. I'm the Acting Director for the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And what we'd like to do for you this morning is just give you an overview of our department, talk a little bit about our programs, just start to introduce many of you to the vocabulary and the sort of the footprint of our agency as we embark on this new legislative term, the new legislative term. So we always think it's important for us to orient our discussion and begin our discussion with a review of our department's mission. Of course, our mission is to protect Michigan's environment and public health by managing our air, water, land, and energy resources, and we do so with a vision towards respecting people, treasuring our natural resources, fostering thriving communities throughout our two peninsulas. We talk a lot about values in our agency, and I think it's important for us to spend just a moment talking about our values with all of you. We as an agency endeavor to make reasoned decisions that exist within the bounds of state and federal law, that are informed by science. We attempt to deliver solutions that reflect our mission and equitably serve the interests of Michigan's residents. And we are a public service agency that is at the forefront of all that we do. We're accountable and responsive to all of Michigan's residents, and we hold ourselves to the highest standards of government ethics and work to vigilantly steward our public funds and resources. We also try and tell our story and communicate proactively, collaborating and engaging with the public to make informed decisions that are in front of us. We attempt to tell our story, sometimes we're better at that than at other times, to try and help folks understand what we do, why we do it, and how our work benefits their lives. We lead by taking a strategic approach that accounts for the impacts of today's actions on future generations. Those of us who are in this work know that the decisions that we make are inherently long-term, and the consequences of those decisions factor heavily into the decisions that we make. And then we invest back in our people. We recognize that knowledge and dedication drive success, and in a field like ours that is constantly evolving and changing, we work to provide a positive workplace with effective leadership and professional development opportunities so that the women and men who work for our department are able to stay at the front of their industry. Our department has over 1,300 employees. We've got great people working for us. They are statewide, many of whom are in your communities. We have 9 divisions, which we'll talk about in a minute, and we have 10 district offices that are located throughout the state, including our environmental laboratory, which is located here in Lansing. I'm not going to read the list for you, but as you can see, we have folks truly scattered all over the state of Michigan that work on our various programs in your local communities. This is the obligatory org chart and will be sort of our guide for the rest of our discussion this morning as I walk you through each of the core functions represented on this organization chart. And we're going to start with a discussion of our Air Quality Division. Air quality works to ensure that Michigan's air remains clean, that we protect human health and the environment by regulating sources of air pollution. We meet and maintain federal and state air quality standards by using the best available technology and cost-effective controls. We work to limit emissions of hazardous and toxic pollutants and keep the public informed about air quality conditions around the state. Air Quality Division engages heavily with businesses, industry, air pollution sources, and the public to ensure clean air by measuring air quality through our air monitoring stations. We've got over 150 monitors at 50 sites across the state, developing and implementing strategies to reduce air pollution, issuing permits, and inspecting facilities. We issued over 330 permits in 2022 and conducted just shy of 1,200 inspections in our air quality program. And we also respond to our public when citizens call to report something that is of concern to them. with regard to their air quality. We respond to almost 2,500 complaints and questions from our public each year. Our Drinking Water and Environmental Health Division oversees the compliance of over 10,000 public water supplies to help ensure quality drinking water, and their authority is derived under the Safe Drinking Water Act. They do things like issue construction permits for public works projects and receive and review regular compliance sampling. Drinking Water and Environmental Health also provides operator certification and training for our water suppliers. We have over 4,000 active certified drinking water operators in the state. They register well water drilling contractors and provide training and technical assistance for local public health partners in our environmental health programs, including the areas of drinking water well construction, on-site wastewater systems, and non-community public water supplies. Our Materials Management Division in our waste program protects public health and the environment by ensuring proper management to prevent the waste releases to the air, land, and water from things like hazardous waste, radioactive materials, solid waste, medical waste, electronic waste, scrap tires, liquid industrial byproducts, and others. Materials Management Division also authorizes infrastructure for recycling and disposal, including annual grants to foster pollution prevention, recycling, market development, and scrap tire cleanups. Now, it's estimated that Michigan disposes of more than $400 million of recycled materials into our landfill every year. And thanks to many of you in the legislature for passing revisions to Part 115 late last term, which was an almost decade-long effort to rewrite Michigan's solid waste statute, which changes the focus from disposal to material management. In our Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division, we assure that the development of oil, gas, and minerals is done in a manner that protects the environment and our natural resources. OGMD oversees oil and gas drilling and production operations at nearly 18,000 locations across the state. They also oversee and monitor underground natural gas storage, comprising of over 2,100 wells with over 1 trillion cubic feet of gas storage capacity, which is the greatest in any state. They oversee wells for wastewater disposal, brine production, and geologic exploration, as well as oversee our programs related to mines for iron, copper, nickel, gold, and other metals, and sand mines in coastal areas. Our Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division also conducted over 15,000 on-site inspections in 2022 of these facilities. Our Remediation and Redevelopment Division oversees Michigan's programs that address soil and groundwater contamination, vapor intrusion, and gas station cleanups. They work toward compliance assistance and oversight at over 1,000 contaminated sites, and we know there are over 24,000 sites of known contamination in Michigan. The Superfund program, which is the most complex and which are the most expensive and complex contaminated sites in Michigan, is coordinated with RRD and the federal government, and we have 65 of those active sites in the state. To work on Superfund and in that program, we used $52 million in state funds to leverage over $530 million of federal funding to provide for Superfund site cleanup. So we leveraged federal to state dollars at a ratio of about 9-to-1 for cleanup activities. RRD also manages the State Drinking Water and Environmental Laboratory, which provides high-quality results and fast turnaround time that's used by many public water supplies for their compliance sampling each year. And just to give you a picture of what that looks like, our lab analyzed over 77,000 samples last year, producing over 1.7 million test results. RRD provides technical and financial assistance to communities to provide cleanup and safe redevelopment of brownfield sites, and this helps to revitalize and redevelop contaminated properties, which protects the environment, helps to reuse existing infrastructure, minimizes urban sprawl, and creates additional economic opportunities. And in 2022, our department provided over $24 million in Eagle Brownfield incentives, which are grants, loans, tax increment financing for 70 projects in 47 communities, which represents a projected return on investment to be about $35 of return for every $1 of Eagle funding provided. Michigan is defined by its water, and our Water Resources Division helps to ensure that it is safe and clean. Water Resources Division administers 3 major regulatory programs that involve the protection of the environment, our groundwater, and our surface waters in the state. And these include our groundwater discharge permits program, our surface water quality program, which are things like aquatic invasive species, the NPDES permitting program, stormwater, wastewater facility construction, and water withdrawal, and our water resources program, which oversees permitting and regulation for critical dunes, dam safety, floodplains, our inland lakes and streams, and wetlands. Water Resources Division also has an emerging pollutant section, which works to identify and limit the introduction of chemicals of concern into our groundwater and surface water. And additionally, Water Resources Division has a program to monitor water quality trends in our rivers, lakes, and streams. In 2022, Water Resources Division issued over 8,300 permits to preserve and protect wetlands, dunes, lakes, and streams, and permits to protect homes and critical infrastructure, and permits to protect our water quality. Our Environmental Support Division is responsible for our outreach and support functions. And they produce outreach events and materials for us, like a few that I'd like to highlight for you now. In April, actually April 11th and 12th of 2023, we're going to be hosting the My Healthy Climate Conference, which is going to be focused on the My Healthy Climate Plan, and that'll be in Detroit, and we'll make sure that additional information about that conference is received by your offices. Additionally, we'll be hosting the 2023 Michigan Environmental Justice Conference, June 21st and 22nd, also in Detroit, and a Great Lakes Water Infrastructure Conference, September 19th to the 21st in Kalamazoo. Our Environmental Support Division also facilitates, in addition to events like these, statewide environmental education activities that are required by Part 25 of NERIPA. ESD also manages and maintains our Environmental Assistance Center, which is essentially the call center for concerns that folks have about the environment. We receive typically about 20,000 calls a year, so our Environmental Assistance Center is our frontline customer service to the general public. And they help to provide emergency management coordination on over 2,500 pollution emergency calls that we receive annually. Our Finance Division, as you would assume, oversees all financial and budget and procurement aspects of our department, including our annual budget. They provide water infrastructure funding and financing, including $1.9 billion in American Rescue Plan and Bipartisan Infrastructure Law federal funding, and oversee and administer the State Revolving Fund, which issued over 100 loans totaling over $673 million in FY22. Additionally, our Finance Division coordinates and provides nearly $19 million in underground storage tank cleanup funding at over 417 facilities in 68 counties on an annual basis. Our Information Management Division works with other divisions in our department and DTMB to provide oversight, leadership, and support for IT initiatives. We're an agency that is pretty heavy on IT, and we need to continue to make investments and modernize our IT infrastructure, which supports many of the regulatory programs that we administer. Information Management Division also coordinates our Freedom of Information Act responses and is responsible for things like web content, our data management, our GIS services, and our internal policy and administrative rulemaking coordination. The Office of the Clean Water Public Advocate accepts and investigates complaints and concerns related to drinking water. This office has launched the Eagle Drinking Water Concern System, which is designed to track and route concerns to the appropriate party, whether internal or external, for follow-up. This office is very critical in that it works collaboratively between and among state agencies, external partners, community partners, and the public to advocate for improved drinking water regulation and policy. And this office also supports initiatives to increase as well as improve access to water infrastructure funding. Our Office of Climate and Energy coordinates, among other things, the My Healthy Climate Plan, which was released on April 21st of last year. We developed that plan with significant input from Michigan residents and the Council on Climate Solutions. And a key focus of that plan is on solutions that support communities that are disproportionately impacted by the changing climate. And as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, I would just call your attention once again to the My Healthy Climate Conference that will take place this April 11th in Detroit. And the idea is to bring together a diverse range of stakeholders to connect and help catalyze Michigan's plan for climate action. So if we've spent the last 18 or 24 months or so in developing what our strategy for climate needs to be, we look at the climate conference as being a very important inflection point where we're going to be focused on effectuating and implementing many of the recommendations that were called for in that plan. The Office of Environmental Justice Public Advocate accepts and investigates complaints and concerns relating to environmental justice. This office works directly with communities and our staff to help facilitate interactions that are related to environmental justice, and coordinates with the state's interagency environmental justice response team, works with the Michigan Advisory Council on environmental justice, and to support the work of both that office and the response team. And here again, I'll just call your attention to the upcoming Michigan Environmental Justice Conference that, again, will be held on June 21st and 22nd in Detroit. And again, we'll be happy to provide additional information to your offices about details for that conference. The Office of the Great Lakes oversees Great Lakes-related water policy. It coordinates with other divisions and external stakeholders and other departments to align Great Lakes policy and strategy implementation. This office is the hub for us in policy development and strategic implementation of programs and initiatives that work more or less at a regional scale to protect and restore and sustain the Great Lakes watershed. And those include things like implementation of the Michigan Water Strategy, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence River Basin Water Resources Compact, the Regional Great Lakes Maritime Strategy, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, Great Lakes Commission, and other regional entities that work on the Great Lakes. It is Michigan's regional voice in regional collaboration. The Office of Legislative Affairs barely needs any introduction to many of you, but they will be your main point of contact for any questions or matters related to bills, policy, or for assistance that you might need on constituent or district-related concerns. I'll just introduce, if you have not yet met Travis Bosco, the legislative liaison for our department, and Jess Eisler, who's sitting back here, who many of you will be interacting with during your term in office. So again, please feel free to contact that office with any questions that you might have on bills that have been introduced, that you're contemplating introducing, or that you're working on. Work with that office to schedule any meetings that you might require of our agency, and for any support and assistance that you might have on district-related items or constituent-related concerns. And our Office of Public Information does exactly what you would assume a public information office would do. They write and publish press releases and related materials. They respond to all of the media requests that come into the agency. They help develop other informational items and products that we can use to help tell our story. They conduct media training for our staff and maintain our social media presence. I think it's also important to just make mention of the fact that our department administers several programs that are administered arising from delegated authority from the federal government. And we work closely with the Environmental Protection Agency on these programs, as well as the permitting actions that are nested under each of them. And most significantly, I think, just call everyone's attention to the fact that Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, including Section 404, which concerns wetlands and delegated authority for wetlands, the Safe Drinking Water Act, and the Hazardous Waste Program are all delegated sources of delegated authority that our department executes and administers with corresponding state statutes, so statutory law as well as regulatory law in the form of our administrative rulemaking authority. So that specific state authority, there are some benefits certainly to our state for having that. It allows all of us as policymakers here, all of you as policymakers in this space to help shape what the administration of those programs look like. And we do connect back in the administration and oversight of those programs back with the EPA. So they have an ability to inform and comment on any changes that we're proposing to make to our administration of that delegated authority, and we work on them for larger permitting actions that we might be contemplating. I know you're not an appropriations committee, but far be it from me to miss an opportunity to shill for additional investment in our agency. But I'll just note that our department is just about 1% or less, or a little less than 1% of the overall state budget. And our budget significantly, and I think this is an important thing to note, supports grants and contracts for local communities. A lot of the resources that we have appropriated into our department are then in turn sent back out into communities in the forms of loans, grants, and other investments to make improvements in critical infrastructure. Bringing and onboarding more permit staffing, and as I mentioned a few minutes ago, continuing to invest in modernizing our information technology systems are some of the top priorities and objectives that we have for our budget going forward. Do you want me to talk about? Oh, yeah. So just in the exec rec, the top line for everyone here, I'll just note that the big buckets in our budget, about 34% of our budget this year in the exec rec are federal funds that we'll administer and pass through. 24% of our budget are restricted funds. More often than not, these represent revenue that's generated across the 65 different fee categories that we have in the agency. 31% of our budget is one-time general fund, and 11% of the proposed budget is ongoing GF dollars. And as I said, we've just gotten underway with some of our appropriations subcommittee hearings. We had our first one on Tuesday, and we've got another one this afternoon. And again, our priorities for the year, we're going to continue to invest back in our department and in those critical systems that we need to efficiently and effectively maintain our programs, provide for excellent public and customer service, focus on cleaning and remediating contaminated sites, making important investments in water infrastructure, working energetically towards environmental justice, and working to implement the My Healthy Climate Plan. Madam Chair, that's what we have for you this morning. Appreciate the time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you or the committee might have.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for our guests? Yes. Representative Pais?
Thank you. Excuse me. What is your staffing numbers? I may have missed that.
What are our staffing numbers? We have
Yeah,
about
how many-
1,350 employees in the department.
I'm sorry, how many?
1,350.
1,350. And the hazardous waste. You worked regarding this trail derailment, and they had the hazardous waste here. So you worked with that also
Yes.
in getting that diverted. So you also then would grant the permits, excuse me, for our waste sites?
That's correct. Yes.
And you would set the regulations then, or is that a federal?
We administer hazardous waste sites are, there's a federal law, and don't ask me to expound on what the acronym is because I'm not 100% sure what it is, but it's RCRA. RCRA is the federal law that establishes a sort of a federal baseline or foundation for the regulation of hazardous waste sites. One of the sources of delegated authority that we have in the state of Michigan and in our department is administering the hazardous waste program on behalf of the EPA. So what we do is we take that foundation in federal law, we establish other laws here in the state of Michigan that stack on top of that foundation, and then we administer through permitting and licensing of facilities for hazardous waste.
Okay. And you also said that you, the cleanup funding that you provide, is this subsidizing what the violators did, or is this like total, I'm not articulating it very well. Somebody does the waste dumping or what have you. And are we subsidizing that, or are we paying outright for that? And are the people who did that, to what extent are they being held accountable?
So the brownfield redevelopment program, that's, when we have places, and I think about it in terms of, places where we've had legacy or historical contamination where maybe the source of that contamination is long gone. But there's a site that we can do some work to remediate the contaminated condition there and then return or restore that parcel or that property back into, back to the community for, other development, for other purposes. So I wouldn't say that it's a subsidy or a benefit to a polluter per se. It's a means by which we can remediate and resolve those sources of community contamination and clean them up, make them safe, and put that property back into use for whatever beneficial purpose that community would like to have it for.
Right. But are the people who made the property that way To what extent are they held accountable?
I just want to add one item onto that. So whenever the state spends state funds on a contaminated site, be that through the Brownfield Redevelopment Program or through state-led cleanups, because we also have funding that we utilize to clean up sites where we identify risks. Part of that process is always assessing through both a legal process and property, kind of looking back through the deeds, is there a liable party that we can still go after to try to recover those funds? Now, in a lot of cases, that's just simply not the case anymore through, corporate means. Those folks aren't around anymore. That business doesn't exist anymore. There isn't a way to track that down. But that's absolutely something that our team does when we're looking at spending state funds on a cleanup.
Okay, and may I ask one more question, Madam Chair?
Just one more.
Yes. I know septic tank issues are a really big thing right now because there's no standard throughout the state, and it causes a lot of distress on multiple organizations, I guess, if you will. So is your department in charge of working on policy to address those kinds of concerns, standardizing, I guess, regulations for it?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if I articulated that well.
I just didn't hear the front end of the question, but Travis, if you caught it, if you want to.
So, Representative, you're correct. So there is no standard statewide sanitary code, right? Each of our health departments or kind of health districts have their own code, and in some cases, then you have townships that have their own. So that is a long push from an environmental perspective, is to try to achieve something to get some statewide minimum standards. Are we in charge of leading that? I don't think so, but we are absolutely happy to be a partner at that table and what we make that look like. We have some folks who have done a ton of work in the past on what do inspections look like? What should they be looking at? What does a failure mean for a septic system? All of those things. So, I've already had the chance to talk with a few stakeholders who are really interested in that. Happy to talk with you, happy to talk with anyone, because that's something that it's a good opportunity to get something done on that.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your patience.
Thank you, Representative. Minority Vice Chair Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to start out by thanking Mr. Eichinger for not only being here, but for the help you provided my former district with the leachate from a bankrupt landfill, and also listening to the residents of a neighboring district when my district had a permit for a new asphalt company and putting a taller smokestack in and being very transparent on the air monitoring. So that was good news. Thank you. So I'm going to, our big push to keep the automobile industry in Michigan is going to be the electric vehicle and batteries and so forth. A lot of that supply chain is taken over by China, especially after we left Afghanistan. But we have a lot of resources right here in Michigan. So they're mining a nickel vein in Wisconsin and in Ontario, and I know we've done some here. But my question goes: that's a big portion of the the metal they're looking for. Are there any pending permits for the Upper Peninsula or for anywhere in Michigan?
I suppose, and I don't want to sound glib, but I suppose the answer to that question is yes. I mean, every permit idea is pending until it's an actual application, right? So I would have to imagine that given, historically the resources that we've had in the state and how they have been accessed in the past, that there are probably many people that are looking at ways that they can develop those resources to do exactly what you're talking about, which is to put those raw materials, those precious metals into a supply chain that's created here and that the end user is intending to use here. I can't speculate on who's out there kind of sort of kicking the tires on those ideas, because folks really don't interact with our program until they're pretty close to making an application, and I couldn't tell you right now whether or not someone's doing that. I just simply don't know that level of detail. But I have to believe that folks are exploring, accessing those resources.
I hear the question come up quite often. I just want to make sure that we are using our resources so that we don't have to be dependent on outside or offshore materials. We can use as much as we can here, employ people here, shorten the supply chain. I'm our majority vice chair may have a little more in-depth information for what the mining companies are really looking for, but I just know that vein's being mined in Wisconsin and in Ontario, and it's not being as heavily used here, and I just would like to make sure that we are leveraging Michigan resources as much as we can to reach towards that goal of 300,000 employees for the EV productions. Thank you.
Next up, we have Representative Shannon.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be real brief. It's a pretty specific question, but it is an issue that our Public Works Department in Macomb County takes very seriously. How much of a problem are flushable wipes to our protection of water quality?
I have no idea. If you've got some idea on that question, Travis, please have at it.
As far as I'm aware, there are no flushable wipes, Representative, to your point, right?
In quotes,
Yes,
flushable.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm not certain from a water quality perspective. I know that from like a sewer integrity perspective, it's a huge problem, right? I've seen some of the pictures that have come out of Macomb County, and so some of those sewer interceptors and the little chambers where you've just got this multiple ton ball of wipes. So yeah, it's certainly an issue that the labeling of that and those going down the sewer.
Well, I'm glad that I brought it up because this is an issue that we're facing in Macomb County. They're causing sewage backup, so I imagine once that happens, then we're starting to get things into Lake St. Clair and other places. So please put that on your radar. Speak with the Public Works Department, Candace Miller, because I see her make comments about this on a regular basis. So it is an issue, and a little bit surprised that you didn't have sort of a direct comment on it, because I doubt that it's just Macomb County.
No, I'm sure you're right, Representative. And me saying I have no idea means that it's just not an issue that's come across my desk in the 8 weeks that I've been in this role. Certainly noted, and I'll just kind of add on to what Travis was saying, that as we continue to look at ways that we can make investments in water infrastructure and wastewater infrastructure, accounting for investments and upgrades in those systems that can handle what the waste stream of today looks like versus what the waste stream of 50, 60, or 70 years ago looked like will be an important thing that we need to keep an eye on as we're making those kinds of investments.
Thank you. Next up, we have Representative Tisdall.
Thank you, Chair Petsky. Acting Director for 8 weeks, congratulations.
Thank you.
You can add this to your resume to really get the job, So, real quickly, you talk about achieving carbon neutrality as an objective for the state. What jurisdictions are we looking at as models of best practices or benchmarks so we can measure our progress?
That's a big question, right? There's a lot that goes.
My specialty.
What's that?
No.
So, one of the things that we are doing, certainly within the My Healthy Climate Plan, and how some of the federal funding that's intended to invest in carbon neutrality, and it takes a sort of a sectoral approach to making investments. So we look at improvements by sectors. So in the sort of the personal use vehicle category, there are goals and strategies that we need to implement to be able to get to carbon neutrality in personal use vehicles. That same thing is true for more heavy industrial type vehicles. There are categories for power generation that we consider. So each one of those sectors sort of has their own moonshot type plan that needs to, that we need to pursue and follow to accomplish those goals. I know that one of the things I think we've got on deck very soon for this committee is to have Corey Conley from our Office of Climate and Energy come in and really do a deep dive for all of you on the My Healthy Climate Plan, which gets into a lot of the kinds of things that you're alluding to, Representative. How do we know when we're there? What are the measures that we're using to say we've gotten there or that we still have work to do? What are the sectors that we're going to be needing to interact with and engage with? How does our department fit into all of that versus other departments and other state agencies. I mean, we can really color in that picture for you.
And who are, I guess, but who are we looking at now and going, hey, that's where we want to be?
I don't know that there's anybody out there that's done that. And actually, you know, I was on a call on Tuesday, or in a meeting on Tuesday. We had a Climate Solutions Council meeting, and we had a person who was coming in and giving us an overview of some of the federal funding sources. He said Michigan is very far ahead of everybody else because we've already got, you know, our My Healthy Climate Plan, and some of the federal dollars that have been made available for work in the climate spaces so that other states can undertake planning efforts like Michigan has. And we're already at the phase this spring where we're going to be thinking about implementation. Well, a lot of other folks are not even there. So I think actually we're going to be the index case for a lot of other states that are going to be looking at Michigan and saying that's the leader that we need to follow and how we get climate right.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, we have Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you. And as a member of the Energy Committee, I can affirm that Corey's got a great, Corey Connolly has a great presentation from the Office of Climate and Energy, and which we just heard, I think that was yesterday. Was that yesterday? No, anyway, it was a long night last night. And it is available on the web. The Climate Solutions Council has a full website unto itself within the Eagle, and has a lot of great information. All their meetings are online. All the information is there, public, and I strongly encourage folks to dig into the information. There's also been modeling done to actually crunch the numbers to show how this can be done with current technology and the advances in technology that are coming. And so it's a very how to bring community information from one committee to another, but there's a lot of terrific information there. And Eagle's going to play, of course, a big role in that. I would like, and then one other thing in terms of that climate question, the name of the mine is Eagle Mine. That is currently doing nickel right now. It's been operational now for many years, so just Eagle, easy to remember. And they have are going in. It's an underground mine and pulling nickel out of the ground, and it's going very well, from what I understand. And then, but my question is on PFAS. Looking to the future, we are unfortunately being impacted in the Central Upper Peninsula quite significantly, and I know it's also an issue in Northern Lower. And so these questions of this forever chemical that does not break down in our environment and is unfortunately causing damage not only in our drinking water supply but also in our ag. I was at a Farm Bureau meeting in the UP last week, and that concern about it in the agricultural sector as well. If you could address that, please.
That's another big
another
big,
whole hearing,
big
really,
topic,
but,
right?
yeah.
But you know, Michigan again, and you know, maybe this isn't quite the kind of leadership that we want to be noted for, but this is another area where I would say our state has really been in a leadership position on looking at PFAS and PFOA. We, I think, do far more surveillance than any other state. So we find PFAS in places, and we are looking for it actively. And I can't say that every other state that likely has PFAS in their environment is doing so with the same level of energy that we are here in Michigan. And all of that will then kind of result in us needing to continue, and I want to underscore that word, continue very important discussions that we have at the policy level about how we effectively regulate and then remediate and what those strategies need to look like. And so we've got, certainly in Michigan, we've got the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, the MPART, which is it's a sort of a cross-agency, cross-department statewide group that works across all of the different inputs related to PFAS to identify issues, to conduct and monitor surveillance, and then to help inform strategies and responses that we need to undertake. And then the other piece, I think that's underlying all of this is you know, what are those standards under the law that we need to have for PFAS, both at the state level, we've got state level standards, but then there's also a conversation that needs to happen at the federal level about establishing federal limits for PFAS in the environment. And I don't think they're quite, again, as far along the path as we are here in the state. So PFAS is a forever chemical, and it's going to be one of those forever conversations that we have. It's just going to be something that we have to engage with, you know, going forward. Now that we know that it's here, we're going to continue to have to evolve and work strategies that help to remediate and respond to it where we find it.
Thank you. Representative Shriver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. According to the EPA, Iowa and Alaska do not allow disposal of hazardous waste. Our Great Lakes account for approximately 85% of North America's fresh water, an extremely invaluable resource for many obvious reasons. Why does Michigan allow disposal of hazardous waste these states don't allow?
Because it's permitted under the law.
Okay, moving on. Almost 300 dams, or 12%, have a high or significant hazard potential rating according to the Michigan section of American Society of Civil Engineers. What does your department plan to do to prevent another major dam outbreak like the catastrophic outbreak that occurred in 2020, which caused 150 homes to be destroyed with damages exceeding $150 million?
So our department has the responsibility for oversight of dam safety, and thanks to some investments that have been made by the governor and folks in the legislature, that's a program that's now much more well-staffed than it was 2.5 years ago. We need to continue to invest in that program. We can't presume to manage and don't provide oversight and safety oversight for hundreds of dams in this state with just a handful of people conducting those inspections. So we want to have oversight, we got to have people, and we've got to have investment to do it, and we need to continue to do so. In the governor's executive recommendation, there's additional funding that she's proposed for us to continue to work on dam safety, so that will continue to be a priority for our agency.
Thank you. Last question. Oh, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add really briefly, Representative, that there was a dam safety task force that looked at state law, state rural capacity, and they recommended a raft of statutory changes, both to increase inspection frequency, kind of come up with things like making sure that dam owners are demonstrating that they can properly maintain, repair those dams so that we don't run into that situation again. Those statutory changes were part of a bipartisan package that was worked on last year with the state legislature. We worked really hard on it. We didn't get there. Would love to partner and keep working on that again, because those are absolutely necessary as well to make sure that there are statutory requirements to upgrade some of those situations.
Thank you. Final question. City of Flint agreed to replace service lines that contain lead by 2020. The city is required to excavate and replace 31,000 service lines that feed water into resident homes. It has taken the city of Flint 6 years to replace the service lines that other cities have done far faster. Flint resident Melissa Mays says the work has been, quote, disorganized and, quote, does not inspire confidence among Flint residents. They have had to go to court 5 times to get Flint to finish what they promised. Plaintiffs argue more than 1,000 homes still need to be evaluated to determine whether they are connected to lead service lines. In Benton Harbor, crews are nearly done with a lead replacement effort that began 14 months ago, involving nearly 4,500 homes. Newark, New Jersey replaced nearly 24,000 lead lines in less than 3 years. Last year, Flint residents have expressed concern that there are still approximately 1,000 homes that still have pipes that need to be checked for lead. This represents a public health hazard. What is the plan to make sure this gets done in a timely fashion?
We continue to work and will continue to work with the city of Flint to provide them with the support, the tools, and the technical and managerial and financial assistance that they require in order to complete that work that they're required to perform under that consent judgment.
Thank you. I just had one quick question, and Representative Tisdale had touched on this a little bit about like reducing carbon footprint and things like that. And I believe your question was more tailored to like how do we figure out who's doing it best and copy that. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit more on how do we measure that? How do we know when, you know, the carbon footprint is being reduced, and how do we figure that out so that we can, you know, expand on those efforts?
I'm not sure I have much of a better answer for you than what I gave you before, other than to say that, the folks who are working in that will work directly in, the sort of sector by sector, program by program, project by project work. There's a baseline and a benchmark that we know, because in order for us to even derive a value of saying, we want an X percent reduction in carbon by, X year, we have to know sort of what our total outputs are to the environment to know whether or not we're making progress there. So, I honestly can't tell you whether or not there's like a gold standard measure that we're using that says like this is the formula that we use, this is the math problem that we're going to use. But that may be a topic that we can unpack more deeply, and it may just sort of elude my understanding right now. That Corey and some other folks from our team can kind of talk a little bit more specifically about that very important question, much better probably than I can.
Wonderful. All right, well, thank you both for taking the time to come and speak to us, and thank you for always being a resource for the questions that we have. I really appreciate it. Of course. Next up, we have a presentation from the Michigan United Conservation Clubs. We have the Executive Director of MUCC, Amy Trotter, and Executive Board President Tim Muir Jr. Thank you for coming today, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, for allowing us to be here this morning. My name is Tim Muir, and I'm currently the president of Michigan United Conservation Clubs. I live in Harrison Township in Macomb County in southeast Michigan. My love of the outdoors started as soon as I could hold a fishing rod. My passion to fish and hunt was ingrained in me from a very young age and really began to grow once I attended Michigan Outdoors Youth Camp back in the mid-'80s. In my day job, I work in IT. But my true passion is in the outdoors and making sure I can share my love of the outdoors with my kids and grandkids. Michigan United Conservation Clubs was founded in 1937 and is the country's largest statewide conservation organization with approximately 200 affiliate clubs and 40,000 members. Our mission is to unite citizens to conserve, protect, and enhance Michigan's natural resources and our outdoor heritage. MUCC consists of 4 main pillars, which Executive Director Amy Trotter will go over in a second. Policy and advocacy, education, conservation and field work, and communications. Thank you for your time this morning. I'll now turn it over to Director Trotter.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Yes, we do have 40,000 members across the state and 200 affiliate clubs. And given the geographic diversity and expanse of our state, you might be surprised to hear that actually 1/4 of those clubs are in southeast Michigan. We actually have more than 50 of our affiliates in that 8-county region of Michigan, because hunters and anglers across the state are everywhere the people are. So it is just by population that is where they're concentrated. And we have a huge economic impact in the region as well, because that's where they're buying their fishing rods, their boats, their trucks, their coolers, and everything else, even if they recreate somewhere in a different part of the state. So just wanted to emphasize, we are a statewide organization, but we do have a strong presence in southern Michigan, because that is where the population is. We also do work with a lot of other organizations beyond even just our membership. So I do want to just mention, I am also chair of the Michigan Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus Advisory Council, which is its own separate C4 organization. But the intent of that is really, and we invite you all to join, please, to come to our events, to come to our opportunities where we have networking breakfasts and we have great opportunities to really interact with the natural resources and learn more about hunting and fishing throughout the state. So please join us, join the list so you can learn more about these activities, and we'd love to have you along. I am also the treasurer for the Coalition to Protect Michigan's Resources, which is the amici in the ongoing Great Lakes Consent Decree negotiations on tribal fishing in the Great Lakes. So we have our hands in that as well. We also run an informal conservation coalition, which is many of our statewide hunting and fishing and habitat groups, and that's how we primarily interact with the Department of Natural Resources on issues related to administrative change and their budget and what the needs are for conservation here in our state. And then we also work through informal groups. So we work a lot with Michigan Environmental Council, the Nature Conservancy. We actually worked strongly in a coalition to help bring across the finish line Proposal 1 of 2020 that amended the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. And we do those things through partnerships. And that's really a lot of what we do and what we are known for. So again, a little bit about our history. 1937, we were founded. We've had an ongoing summer youth camp program here in our state for more than 75 years. We're very proud of that. We've launched Michigan Out of Doors Magazine, also 75 years ago. But we've had our hands in a lot of historical components across Michigan's history. The bottle deposit law was run out of our office. The Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund and the creation of that, again, almost now 50 years ago, was something that we have been engaged in. We have Tracks Magazine, and I've actually provided one of those for you at the desk as well. You know, this is one of our flagship school children outreach programs, really targeted for 4th grade. We've been involved in the statewide initiative for the Scientific Fish and Wildlife Conservation Act in 2014. And in 2020, we were engaged in a litigation to restore the rights for individuals to use their motorized boats here in Michigan. Also in 2020, we were at the ballot amending the Natural Resources Trust Fund to ensure it is a resource in perpetuity. So again, we touched on the 4 main pillars, and I want to go a little bit more into this because I'm leaving behind with you our legislative priorities document so you can understand the breadth of our organization and all that we do. On the Ground is been around for about 10 years. This is our flagship program for stewardship, engaging citizens in giving back to our public lands. And we've been doing this for about 10 years, and this year we will be celebrating our 200th project on public lands across the state where we engage our members but also our non-members in giving back to the resource. We have put more than 16,000 hours, volunteer hours, on the ground here in our state to make sure that we have quality fish and wildlife and public access opportunities. We have Michigan Out of Doors Magazine, which you all should be getting now in your offices, and we just had our March 1 issue drop that featured the Arctic grayling on the front of it. So just to connect, that is one of our publications. It comes out quarterly and has been a good resource, not just for tips and tricks on how to hunt and fish, but also a lot of conservation policy as well. I mentioned Tracks Magazine. That is actually aligned with our science standards here for 4th graders, so we are ensuring that teachers have a tool, and it goes to about 12,000 students in our state. We would love to see it expanded as well. And it's primarily actually supported through our clubs in their communities. So they're the ones really sponsoring that in their communities across the state. And it is a great tool. We've evaluated it. We've talked to teachers. They use it. I actually sponsor my own daughter's 4th grade class as well, so make sure that she has that resource in her classroom here in Hazlitt. Michigan Out of Doors Youth Camp is actually a fairly unique program across the state. You've heard about summer camp programs, I'm absolutely sure. Ours has been so long running, and we've really developed a niche in the summer camp game because not only are we teaching the outdoor skills that you would expect, kayaking, fishing, fire building, all of those things that you might expect to learn at a summer camp, but we're also focusing on conservation science as well. So we're talking about water ecology, we're talking about forest management, and we're trying to really instill the whys behind why we engage in the environment and how we can make sure to provide that stewardship ethic. But we also definitely inspire people to be future license purchasers. So we want to make sure that they're learning to fish and that they understand that by buying a license, that's giving back to the resource as well. We teach them about hunter safety. Every kid that comes through our camp has the opportunity to be hunter safety certified. We have a .22 range, we have an archery range, so they're shooting as well. And that is one commitment that we have, is to safe and well-trained future conservationists in our state. And then what you'll interact with me and my staff on the most is, of course, our grassroots policy setting process. And I do want to mention, we do have another policy assistant on staff. His name is Justin Tomei. He'll come before you from time to time. And then we are also represented by Bill Jackson at McKelvey Merchant and Associates, too. So you'll probably be interacting with him as well. But I wanted to really explain how we get to this point here, and it actually is a year-long process of us developing our policy positions with our members. It is not staff that comes up with these ideas. It truly is a grassroots organization where they come up with resolutions where they want to see change in the world, whatever that change might be in the conservation space. They develop an idea, they vet it through our policy board, which is an elected board that helps to sort of vet these ideas, ask questions of clarification. We invite the Department of Natural Resources in to provide us comments and thoughts and background as needed throughout this process. And then ultimately, it comes to game time, which is our annual convention. This year, for the first time ever, is actually going to be in March, and we are excited to be in Mount Pleasant at the end of this month this year, where we typically bring together delegates from across the state that are representing their club or groups of individual members within their region, and they're going to be voting just like you vote. They amend, they debate, there's mics on the floor, the whole bit happens within our organization to really develop this policy. And anything that passes there that actually has a change of law required or a change in Natural Resources Commission policy actually requires a 2/3 majority support to become my marching orders that I'm bringing to you. So anything that I'm talking about here that does require a statutory change actually has 2/3 of my members' support at a minimum in order for us to be bringing that. So we know we have a supermajority of our membership behind us when we are bringing ideas before you. And we span the globe on issues as it relates to the natural resources and outdoor recreation. We have 17 resolutions coming this year alone, and they go all the way from wake boats and pontoon boats to cormorant funding and renewable energy siting. So you will see everything from deer hunting and fishing policy, natural resources funding initiatives. We are actually thrilled to be able to say that one of our priorities for MUCC is already done. So thank you. Last night, as part of your supplemental appropriations, $10 million for wetlands. That was one of our priorities. So I can already go to my members at the end of this month and at least check one box in our legislative priorities document. So thank you for that. As it relates to decriminalization of deer harvest penalties, actually, that is a bill that we're tracking in the Senate. We testified on Tuesday in Senate Bill 52, and we expect that to be coming to your committee as well. Other things on the agenda, there's a lot, so I'll try to go through it as quickly as I can in the interest of time, but commercial guiding is a long-running issue that we want to see tackled here in the state. It is really the oversight of an industry that has very little regulation. Certainly there's hunting and fishing regulations, but it is the oversight of guides who are, making money, taking novice hunters and anglers out, that we want to make sure that we have a bare minimum of oversight and regulatory oversight for this industry. We are starting with a low bar. These are bills that we have been working on for many, many years now, and it truly is a low bar that we want to make sure is getting the bad actors out of the woods and waters, and we are ensuring that we are getting data from them as well that we can use then in the scientific management of fish and wildlife. And I'm also pleased to say that those bills were dropped in the Senate, Senate Bill 103, 104, and 105, again, just yesterday. So yesterday was a good day in terms of seeing our priorities move through. And we look forward to these bills coming to your committee as well. Now, commercial fishing is another big issue. It is one that we started trying to tackle actually probably about 5 years ago. We got close in 2019 and 2020 session. We had a 3-bill package, House Bill 4567 through 69. It actually was a bipartisan package of 3 bills, and it passed with bipartisan support in the House back in 2020. Unfortunately, we ran into some roadblocks in the Senate, but we are re-energized to bring this back here to the Michigan legislature this year. And again, what we're doing is really trying to clean up some decades-old statute. It is not sufficiently protective of game fish. We want to make sure that we know where the nets are. We know, that there is some good, strong enforcement. We want to make sure that there is regular harvest reporting. Again, just as we would be asking for our members who are hunters and anglers, we expect the same from the commercial fishing industry. And I do want to be clear that this is the state-licensed commercial fishing side of the coin. This does not impact in any way the Native American treaty rights that we're talking about through the consent decree process. This is our state-licensed commercial fishermen on the Great Lakes. And now Proposal G, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Proposal G to some extent. In 1996, voters passed overwhelmingly to support the Natural Resources Commission having exclusive authority over hunting and now fishing regulations. We want to make sure that the intent of Proposal G is upheld. So we are going to have concerns, and some of you who were around last session might recall the deer harvest bill actually got kind of turned on its head at the last minute. We called for and supported the veto on that bill because what had happened is that it was taking authority away from the Natural Resources Commission. And so you will see us talk about commission authority as a high priority for us in whatever kind of piece of legislation that we might be engaging in. So we do want to ensure that, again, that group of appointed individuals, it is bipartisan, we do believe is the right kind of level of conversation that we want to have for our hunting and fishing regulations. There's a lot of other priorities here. So again, just quickly, I mentioned the wetland funding. Fixing 40107 is really along the lines of Proposal G. Some of the statute was in law before Proposal G was passed, and I think we need to sort of clarify a little bit better the lines of authority between the department and the Natural Resources Commission on that. We want to do that in partnership with the Department of Natural Resources and the Natural Resources Commission. We're talking about, there's a lot of discounted hunting and fishing licenses in our state. There is actually state statute that says the general fund should be reimbursing the department those lost restricted funds as a result of those reductions of discounted licenses. To my knowledge, that hasn't happened at least in the last 15 years that I've been here at MUCC. So something we want to tackle. But beyond that, we want to talk about aquatic habitat. We want to talk about permitting. We want to engage in a lot of conversations on recycling, and you will see us here on a whole smattering of issues, and those will be issues that we're coming to you with partners. But I wanted to really focus on the ones that I expect that we will be leading the charge and bringing people in. And with that, I can wrap up and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Representative Arbit.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm looking at the documentation that you provided, and under the actually, where was it? I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. You know, one of the things that, so I represent West Bloomfield and the Lakes area in Oakland County. And so we have a lot of inland lakes and wetlands, and it's a really, really big issue in our community. And one of the things that has come to my attention is, you know, in terms of talking about toxic algal blooms and different bodies of water across the state. And I'm wondering if you're aware what, you know, position your organization and members are regarding how the state currently treats the standard treatment for remediation for toxic algal blooms. Because from my understanding, currently we treat it with copper sulfate, which is actually an ineffective treatment and actually doesn't work and actually sort of makes it worse, right? There actually is a new sort of type of technology using enzymes to actually sort of destroy those the cyanobacteria in the different bodies of water, and we're looking into how the states can sort of actually the state has to approve that as a treatment. But so that's one of the things working with the different with Eagle to make sure that permitting process actually goes through. I'm just wondering if that's something you're aware of, or the organization has an opinion on.
I haven't heard anything specifically about enzyme technology, but I'm very interested, so I want to learn more. Algal blooms, harmful algal blooms, are a huge issue for our membership. We just commissioned a study with Michigan State University that showed that our fishing was actually impacted to the tune of $5.9 million a year in terms of lost fishing opportunity, charter captains, all of it. So it is definitely a priority of ours to address because it's having actual economic consequences to the region, but also it's impacting outdoor recreation and the management of the fisheries. The other thing I would just say about environmental permitting in general in inland lakes, my bass anglers would tell me I was remiss if I didn't mention it, but to some extent we have, and we want to combat aquatic invasives, definitely. But in some areas of the state, we may have gone actually too far, and we've now impacted the native vegetation as well, which fish rely on. And our bass anglers don't want our lakes turned to swimming pools. Sure. And so we do think there's at least a conversation, and I actually mentioned it to Travis with Eagle on the way in today, that's a conversation we want to be part of as well, because again, vegetation is important. We don't want to go too far with treatments that we're, again, sterilizing our natural water bodies as well.
For sure. Thank you.
Next up, we have Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you. Thanks for all the amazing work. I want to on the ground. There's one coming up this weekend in Alger County. If anyone wants to come up, we're going to be making fish habitat on Autrain Lake on Saturday morning. And I'm hoping to be there. I've got like 3 events, unfortunately, that day. But there is one in Alger County for everyone who's going to be in that area just this Saturday. I also wanted, following up on my colleague's question of what to aim for in terms of best practice, very curious about the hunting guide question. I have an uncle who's a Maine hunting guide, which is a very, very rigorous process. And I wondered, just really, we're running out of time, but do we have things in mind? Is there a planning process that needs to happen? Just where are we in that process?
In terms of the commercial guiding conversation, it's been going on so long. We have bills that just got dropped in the Senate yesterday. So we have a plan. It is not the Maine, which is the Cadillac version, I would say, across the country, or maybe Alaska, where you have apprentices and outfitters and multiple years to get a license. Ours is really just the start of a conversation, I think, a longer-term conversation. But we have to start somewhere, I guess. So we want to make sure they're licensed and that they meet some minimum requirements, like not having felonies or poaching violations would be at least the start of the bar, and that we have the ability, again, to get that information then to manage the resource. So that's where we're starting. There's a lot of different ways it could go, but we really wanted to tackle something that we could get on the books quickly and, again, in a bipartisan fashion.
Okay, and the last question, we have time for one more, will come from Representative Shriver.
Thank you. How are you going to define the dollar-for-dollar return on yesterday's $10 million giving for Michigan taxpayers?
In terms of the wetland investment, we know that it absolutely will give back to our economy here in our state. In Michigan, hunters, the hunting and fishing community generates $11.2 billion a year in economic activity as a result of our outdoor recreation. So this $10 million for wetland habitat is creating wildlife habitat, of course. It is also supporting fisheries, and then it's also trying to tackle Lake Erie, which we already have some economic data too in terms of addressing harmful algal blooms. So I don't have an exact number of a return on investment, but we know that the hunting and fishing community at least generates a lot of economic activities, and this is an investment that is going to inspire new investments, because there's going to be private investment as well through groups like Ducks Unlimited. Our partner groups are bringing private dollars to the table. They're bringing federal dollars as well to the table to match that and amplify it. But then in terms of what we are protecting and then growing in terms of the economic impacts, we think is really important for the state.
Amy, Tim, thank you very much for coming today. I really appreciate it. Lots of great stuff for us to work on, so thank you both. Members, I did just want to note as well, I know a lot of our questions covered climate. Michaela did send out the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan as well with our information about today's hearing, so that's there for us to reference as well. And we will make sure that everyone has contact info for the presenters today if you don't already. So. Having no absent members and seeing no further questions, we have no further business before the committee. Committee will stand adjourned.